My name is Evelyn Maddox. To most of the world, and certainly to the people I command, I'm Major General Maddox. But to the two people who gave me my name, I'm not sure what I am anymore. A problem, I suppose. A memory they'd rather file away. It all came back to me, that feeling of being erased, the day the invitation arrived. It was sitting on my desk, stark white against the dark wood, looking less like a celebration and more like a dare. Heavy cardstock, gold-embossed lettering, fancy script. It was for my sister Haley's wedding. For a second, just a split second, a little flicker of something hopeful fluttered in my chest. Maybe this was it. Maybe after 6 years of a silence so cold it could freeze you from the inside out, this was the olive branch. 6 years without a single phone call on my birthday. 6 years of hearing about my own life through third-hand military gossip. 6 years since I almost lost my hearing in an ambush in Helmand province, and the only message I got from my family was a forwarded email from a distant cousin saying she'd heard I was on the mend. I picked up the envelope. It felt heavy, not with good news, but with the weight of expectation. I slid my finger under the seal and pulled out the invitation. And there, tucked inside, was a small, separate note, written in my mother's perfect, sharp handwriting. It wasn't a letter, it wasn't even a sentence. It was just one word: behave. Not, we miss you, not, we hope you can make it. Just, behave. Like I was some kind of unruly child, a potential liability they had to warn in advance. Like I was a bomb they were inviting into their perfectly curated lives, hoping I wouldn't go off. And in that moment, any little flicker of hope I had just vanished. It was replaced by this cold, heavy certainty. This wasn't an invitation to rejoin my family. This was a summons. I wasn't being asked to share in their joy. I was being brought in as a prop for their perfect family picture, a way for them to show everyone that they tried with their difficult, uniformed daughter. You know, people always think stories like this, stories of betrayal and getting your own back, start with this big explosive moment of anger. But mine didn't. It started right there, in my quiet office overlooking the Stuttgart training grounds, with a feeling of profound disbelief. I just stared at that one word, and a question popped into my head, a ridiculous, childish question. Did they even remember how to love me? Or was I just a rank and a uniform to them now, a problem to be managed? Outside my window, the wind was tapping against the glass, and I watched a new class of recruits running drills on the field below. They were so young, so full of that raw, untested optimism. They hadn't learned yet that sometimes the deepest wounds don't come from the enemy. Sometimes they come from the people who are supposed to be your safe harbor, the people who raised you. I swear, for a moment, I really envied them their ignorance. A soft knock on the door broke the silence. It was my aide, Simmons. He's a good man, sees more than he lets on. He stepped inside and his eyes went straight to the envelope in my hand. He didn't have to ask what it was. News travels fast in our world. "You goin', ma'am?" he asked, his voice neutral. I turned the card over in my hand, feeling the sharp edges. "It's not really an invitation, Simmons," I said, my own voice sounding distant. "It's a challenge." He just nodded, a silent acknowledgement that he understood perfectly. I hadn't decided yet if I was going to walk away from their challenge or if I was going to walk right into the middle of it. But I knew one thing for sure. If I went, I wouldn't be going as Evelyn. I'd be going as Major General Maddox. I would wear the stars on my shoulders, not to show off, but to serve as a quiet, unignorable reminder that they didn't get to erase me. Not anymore. The flight to Virginia was long, and it gave me too much time to think. I remembered my father. He was a general too, a man carved from granite and procedure. He didn't know how to deal with a daughter who didn't just follow the rules, but questioned them, rewrote them. Haley was the easy one. She was beautiful, charming, and knew how to play the part of a perfect daughter in a perfect military family. I was complicated. I was driven not by a need for approval, but by a need to prove myself on my own terms. When our father passed away, I flew home on an emergency transport. I walked into the church in my dress blues, expecting a seat in the front row, but it was already full. My mother, Haley, and my uncle sat shoulder to shoulder, leaving no space. There was no room for me. I stood in the back for the entire service, a silent soldier at her own father's funeral. They never even looked back. Now, pulling into the perfectly manicured cul-de-sac where I grew up, it felt like I was entering a time capsule. The hedges were trimmed with surgical precision. The paint on the house was flawless. It was the kind of soul-crushing perfection that leaves no room for messy things like real emotions. I parked my rental car and walked up the stone path, my heart a dull, heavy drum in my chest. I knocked on the door, and for a long moment there was nothing. Then the smell hit me. Lemon polish, my mother's signature scent. It was the smell of my childhood, the smell of constant, unspoken disapproval disguised as cleanliness. The door opened, and there she was, Barbara Maddox. She looked at my uniform first, her eyes doing a quick, dismissive scan of the stars on my shoulders before finally landing on my face. There was no warmth, no welcome. "Evelyn, please don't ruin this for Haley." She said that. That was my welcome home. I just gave a single, tight nod. I couldn't trust my voice. I stepped inside. The house was exactly as I remembered it. The grand chandelier, the polished mahogany furniture, the china cabinet filled with plates that were never used, and the same suffocating tension hanging in the air. This was the rehearsal dinner, and the family was gathered around the long dining room table. 14 people, 15 seats, and I knew without even looking which one was mine. It was at the far end, tucked away by the kitchen door, the seat for the afterthought. The one spot where you were technically in the room, but not really a part of it. No one greeted me, no one stood up. A few cousins offered tight, uncomfortable smiles. I saw one of them whisper to another, and I didn't have to be a lip reader to catch the word security. They thought I was Haley's security detail. The thought was so absurd, it was almost funny. I walked to my assigned seat and sat down, my back straight, my hands folded in my lap. The silence from my end of the table was a universe away from the cheerful chatter at the other end. Have you ever been there? Have you ever walked into a room that once was the center of your world and felt like a complete ghost? It's a strange, hollow feeling, isn't it? The way people can look right through you, erasing you with their polite, determined ignorance. It was clear they had all agreed on the strategy. Just pretend she's not really here and maybe she'll disappear. The wedding day itself was even more of a performance. The ballroom was stunning, a sea of white linens and gold-rimmed plates. There was even a massive ice sculpture of Haley and Andrew's initials. It was a perfect scene, designed for perfect pictures. And then I saw the seating chart. I stood in front of the ornate brass easel, my eyes scanning the list of names. Table 1, Haley and Andrew. Table 2, our parents. Well, our mother and her new husband. Tables 3 and 4 were filled with cousins and close friends. I read the list twice. My name wasn't there. Not Evelyn Maddox. Not Major General Maddox. Then I saw it. Tucked away at the very bottom for table 12, right next to the swinging doors of the catering kitchen, was a tiny, almost illegible scribble, E. Maddox. The napkin at my place setting was even a slightly different shade of white. It wasn't a mistake. It was a message, as clear as a direct order. You are not one of us. I'd seen less strategic planning on the battlefields of Afghanistan. Haley, my sister, floated through the room in her cloud of white tulle, a smile permanently affixed to her face. She was a master of appearances. She paused by my table, not to talk to me, but to talk at me. I told them not to make it look too military for your side of the guest list. she said with a sugary sweet smile, gesturing vaguely at the empty chairs around me. Then she drifted away before I could even process the insult. My side of the guest list. There was no one on my side. I had come alone. I sat there, a silent observer in my own family's theater. I thought about Andrew, her fiancé. I had served with him. In fact, I was the one who pulled him out from under a collapsed wall after an IED blast. I was his commanding officer. I had saved his life. And now at his wedding, I was being treated like an uninvited stranger. Then came the toasts. My mother's new husband went first, talking about new beginnings. Then my mother stood, raising her glass. To family, she said, her eyes sweeping the room, to loyalty and grace. She looked right past me, as if my chair was empty. And then
it was Haley's turn. She took the microphone, a champagne flute sparkling in her hand. She had the audience captivated. "I'm so happy everyone could be here," she began, her voice dripping with emotion. "Even my big sister managed to make it, flying all the way from, well, wherever it is she guards doors these days." A ripple of laughter went through the room. It wasn't mean, not exactly. It was the kind of polite, dismissive laughter you give when you're in on a private joke. My mother, emboldened, chimed in from her table, her voice carrying across the ballroom. "She's always been the shame of this family, but at least she's punctual." And that did it. The polite laughter turned into a full-throated roar. Glasses clinked. People were looking at me now, smirking. They weren't just erasing me anymore. They were actively mocking me right there in the open. For years, I had swallowed their slights, their dismissiveness, their cold silence. I had endured it because I thought that's what you do for family. But in that moment, something inside me settled. It wasn't anger. It was clarity. I didn't yell. I didn't storm out. I didn't even let a single tear fall. I simply stood up. The movement was slow, deliberate. I picked up my untouched glass of champagne. The room quieted down, watching me, expecting a scene. I raised the glass in a silent toast, took one calm, measured sip, and then set it down on the table with a soft click. The silence in the room was now absolute, thick and heavy. I looked from my mother to my sister, my gaze steady. "The people whose doors I guard," I said, my voice not loud but clear enough to cut through every lie in that room, outrank every single person here. I let the words hang in the air. The smirks vanished, the laughter died. No one knew what to do. They had expected me to cry or to shout, to play the part of the hysterical, rejected daughter. They had not expected this. They had not expected a general. And then I saw him, across the room, Andrew, Haley's new husband. He had been standing near the head table, but now he was walking. He walked past his new in-laws, past my mother who hissed something at him that he completely ignored. He walked right past his bride, Haley, who stood frozen, the microphone slipping from her hand. He didn't stop until he was standing one pace in front of me. The room held its breath. He didn't speak. He just looked at me, his expression unreadable. Then he raised his hand to his brow in a salute. It was crisp, perfect, the kind of salute born from years of discipline and respect. "Major General Evelyn Maddox," he said, his voice ringing with authority. "Forgive my wife. She's not familiar with the customs of honor." You could have heard a pin drop, then a collective gasp. Haley's perfect smile shattered. Her eyes went wide with a mixture of shock and horror. And then, like a puppet whose strings had been cut, she just collapsed. She fainted right there on the dance floor. Someone screamed. A champagne flute shattered. My mother shot to her feet, her chair clattering to the floor behind her. But I didn't move. I just held Andrew's gaze. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about respect. It was about the truth finally finding its voice. From a table near the back, an older man in a suit stood up. Colonel Reardon, retired. He too raised his hand in a salute. then another man, General Park, a friend of my father's, then a woman I didn't recognize, but whose eyes held a deep, knowing respect. One by one, 4 retired officers in that room stood and saluted me. They were saluting not just my rank, but the truth that had just been laid bare for everyone to see. My mother tried to regain control. "This is highly inappropriate," she sputtered, but no one was listening to her anymore. The power in the room had shifted. It hadn't shifted because I had demanded it. It had shifted because it was finally acknowledging a truth they had tried so hard to bury. Andrew lowered his hand and stepped back, ceding the floor to me without a single word. I didn't need to say anything else. I had stood my ground, not with anger, but with the quiet, unshakable weight of my own worth. And in the ensuing chaos, as people rushed to Haley's side, I simply picked up my coat and walked out. The war was over, and I had won not by fighting their battle, but by refusing to fight it at all. The next day, my mother requested a meeting. We met in the quiet, sterile lounge of my hotel. She sat across from me, clutching a cup of coffee, looking small and flustered. "You certainly made a statement," she began, avoiding my eyes. "I didn't say a word until I was publicly insulted," I replied calmly. "The media is having a field day with it," she went on as if that was my primary concern. "Haley is devastated. I thought maybe you could release a statement, something to calm things down, clarify that it was all a misunderstanding." I just looked at her. A misunderstanding? 6 years of silence? A note telling me to behave? Public humiliation? That was a misunderstanding? "Let me get this straight," I said, my voice dangerously soft. "You want me to lie to protect your reputation after you tried to destroy mine?" "She never tried to destroy you," she insisted, a little too quickly. That's when I knew. I had held on to this secret for 7 years, a quiet poison I had swallowed alone. I reached into the leather folio I'd brought with me and slid a document across the table. 7 years ago, I said, watching her face, an anonymous ethics complaint was filed against me. It alleged that I had falsified combat reports, that my Bronze Star was a political favor, that I was emotionally unstable. It cost me my first promotion to general. I was sidelined for a year. She face went pale. "That could have been anyone, Evelyn. You have enemies." "I do," I agreed. "But enemies don't usually use family-specific phrases." I slid a second document across the table. "This is a linguistic analysis report, compiled by military intelligence. They cross-reference the writing style, the vocabulary, the sentence structure of the complaint with known writing samples." I tapped my finger on the bottom line. 96% match to Haley Maddox, secondary lexical contributor, with phrases provided, Barbara Maddox. She stared at the paper as if it were a snake. She didn't deny it. She couldn't. "You didn't just ignore me, Mother," I whispered, the words tasting like ash. "You actively sabotaged me. You fed my sister the poison and let her deliver the bite." Her eyes filled with tears, but they didn't fall. "She couldn't compete with you," she finally choked out. "You were always so much, so strong. It made her feel small. I was just trying to level the playing field, to protect her." "Protect her?" My voice finally cracked. "You didn't protect her. You poisoned her, and you threw me to the wolves to do it. You didn't lose me, Mother. You threw me away." I stood up, leaving the documents on the table between us, a signed confession of a different kind. I walked away, and this time I knew I would never be back. The silence that followed me out of that hotel wasn't their choice anymore. It was mine. I didn't go back to Germany right away. I took a leave of absence and flew to Italy. I rented a small cottage on the Amalfi Coast, a place where the sea and the sky met in a brilliant, endless blue. For the first time in my adult life, I had no orders, no schedule, no uniform. I just was. The story of the wedding went viral, of course. The video of Andrew's salute was everywhere. People called me a hero, an icon of quiet strength. The Pentagon called, offering me a prestigious position on a new ethics advisory board. It was the ultimate irony. They wanted me to help fix the very system my family had tried to use against me. I politely declined. Instead, I used my own funds to start something new, the Resilience Foundation. It's a resource for service members who have been victims of career sabotage, not from the enemy, but from within their own ranks, their own homes. We provide legal counsel, emotional support, and a path back to the careers they earned. We help them find their voice, just as I had to find mine. My mother wrote to me once, a handwritten letter that found its way to my cottage. She said she had seen an interview I did for the foundation. I didn't realize how much you had accomplished then. I wish I had seen you for who you were then. But she had seen me. She had seen me all along. She just chose to look away. I never wrote back, not out of anger, but out of peace. My new life wasn't built on the ashes of my old one. It was built on a new foundation of self-respect and quiet purpose. Sometimes a young boy from the village nearby brings me fresh bread. He asked me once, his English hesitant, "Were you really a general?" I smiled, looking out at the endless blue water. I said,